them up from there. So stuff we're going to cover today is going to be use the Flash drawing alignment tool, select objects, apply colors, work with drawn objects, text objects, work with layers and objects. Layers in particular, you need to get really familiar with layers and the way Flash and Adobe products tend to work. So one thing to remember is computers display graphics in either bitmap or vector format. Flash is really good in terms of vector graphics. Vector graphics and bitmap graphics, there is a difference. Bitmap graphics generally use an image as an array of dots, or more commonly known as pixels. Vector graphics represent images using lines, so you don't lose the clarity when you're zooming in or zooming out, especially when you're zooming in. So if we were to launch Flash, so you guys can do that too. So on these machines, it's under Adobe CS6, and I'm assuming that most of you have downloaded the free trial or the monthly subscription of Flash. So make sure you have downloaded that. And when you open that, it takes a while. So once you've launched Flash, we could just open ActionScript 3.0. And remember, I always like to work in Classic, so I'm going to change from Essentials at the top to Classic. So we're on the same page. So with the Classic, we see the toolbar on the left, the timeline at the top, and we have different panels on the right. So I'm just going to draw a circle, just to show you what a vector, and in particular what a vector image is. So each time we do zoom in, you press Control plus allows you to zoom in. So once again, if you did miss what I just did, I clicked on the oval, and then on the bottom left you'll see this sort of pinch, that triangle. You left click and keep a left click button down, and you'll see other options collapse open, and I selected the oval. So once again, okay, let me relaunch Flash again. Seems my Flash crashed. Once again, while that's loading, I'm referring to chapter 2, so I'm going to go through this section. I'm going to pull sections out of here, so remember to go through it in your own time. So in Flash, open ActionScript 3.0, I'm going to draw an oval. So there's my circle, and the color that was chosen was that sort of blue color, which was set initially. I could change this color anytime by clicking on the selection tool. When I click on it, I can then go to fill color, and I can change any of these colors. So make sure you get familiar with that. With Flash, it allows you to merge objects too. So for example, I'm going to draw the same object on this same layer. I'm going to keep it the name layer 1 as is. I'm going to draw another circle. In fact, I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to select it, Control C to copy, Control C to copy, then click outside of that and Control V for Victor. And that will copy that object, Control V for Victor. Now move that object away. Okay, now we have two of these objects. Now if we merge them together, just bring it close and then let go and click outside, and now try selecting them. Now this is one object. So that's one thing you can do with Flash. Click outside, then click back onto the object. Now this object has been merged. So you could do a lot of things by merging objects. We can also, so basically we've just overlapped. We can also slice this object if we want to. We could go to the selection tool at the top left hand side, and let's draw a box here, or rectangle. So it's going to select half of our object. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see that. Now we can move that up. So you can see what you can do. You can do all kinds of things. We can, you know, break objects apart. So there's a lot of things you can do by these simple sort of tricks. So initially, if you do have an object you're trying to draw, you can merge them. You can separate them. So once again, I'm going to undo everything, draw another circle. And now I'm going to select a different color. And we'll just select, say, gray, and then draw another circle. I'm just going to draw another circle on top of that. Now it's allowed me to sort of take a chunk of that circle off. So it's easier for me to kind of draw a moon there. Not quite, but let me try another one. Let's do it again. Let's make a better one there. Okay, there. So there's my moon. Obviously it's not the right color, so I could change the color to maybe a gray, change my stage color to, say, a darker color, maybe black. Change this to white. There's my moon. And I could still move this around. There's other things we can do. We could have that animate if we want to. So make sure you do get familiar with that, play around with that. So I'm going to give you 5 odd minutes to play around with objects. So how you would merge them, and what you can create from the combination of different objects. So play around for 5 minutes. I'm going to pause the video there. So on the right side under properties, you can change the color by clicking on the stage. Remember, the stage dimensions can also be changed. And last week I mentioned what FPS was. What is FPS?
Frames per second.
Frames per second, exactly, yes. So moving on from there, to give you a summary. So these are some of the drawing tools available in Flash. So this PowerPoint slide is available in the data file section, so you may want to download it and familiarize yourself. So selection is what we actually use on a regular basis, where we're moving and dragging objects around. Sub-selection is if we want to select anything and make changes to it. Free transform, we can rotate it, we can skew it. 3D rotation, we'll cover that later on. The pen, text, line, rectangle, oval, these are all available under this section. We have the pen, the pencil. The pen and the pencil, or the brush, can be a bit difficult if you don't have a Wacom tablet. You know, it's difficult to create anything decent using the brush. Same thing applies with the spray brush. The bone tool will actually cover. You can create an object. Rather than doing a frame by frame, it allows you to move limbs around. You know, you can move the arm around or create any type of structure, which allows twinning to be far more productive. The eyedropper basically will allow you to select a particular color. Zoom, you can zoom from the left side. What I tend to use is I use the shortcuts Control+ to zoom in and Control- to zoom out. So make sure you go through the chapter on that. On the right side, we went through this last week. Color, we've got different colors, we've got alignments. So you could select an object and you could say, do you want it left aligned, right aligned? You could select that once it's a symbol. And some of you may be familiar because your assignment was based on some kind of simple animation. Remember, how do we create a symbol? Well, what we did last week was we actually dragged and dropped and played around with the timeline. We can also create a symbol by selecting an object. We could do right click, select the object, right click, and we could say create motion tween. And that's created a symbol. A symbol is represented by that blue box. And if we refer to page 2-6, it's talking about positioning objects on the stage. Basically, positioning is when you move them around. I'm just going to undo that. When we double click on it, and we click on Free Transform Tool, the Free Transform Tool can allow us to rotate this. So once again, let's do this again from scratch. I'm going to start afresh. So ActionScript 3.0, I'm going to select the rectangle. And I'm going to right click. And I'm going to say create motion tween. I can also say convert to symbol if I don't want to tween it. Let's just do convert to symbol. We need to give it a name. I'm going to say rectangle. It's always good to give a symbol a name. Once we've done that, it comes up with different options of movie clip, button, or graphic. We're just going to use graphic for the time being. Okay, on the right side, there's a section that's the registration point. By default, it may be set up to the top left-hand side. I want to change that to be right in the middle. Now, what is the purpose of the registration point? If we click OK, you will see this circle appear in the middle of our object. The purpose of this is where everything, that's the center of that object. It's going to rotate based on where that particular registration point is. Where that point is, I can move that by clicking on it and replace it. Now, if I try to rotate it, it's rotating at this particular point here. So once again, you can go to Free Transform, select the object, and by default, that's right in the middle. See that circle? That is the registration point. I can move that anywhere I like, even outside of the object. If I was to move it outside of the object, this particular object will rotate outside around that particular registration point. So I'm just going to put it back where it was. And we'll do more of that. I'll take sections out of that, but remember that registration point. The benefit of that is we could have any object and we could say this is going to be our pivot point rather than from the center of our object. For example, if we had a crane. So for example, let me quickly create something. It's not going to be the best, but I'm going to create some objects. Right click, I'm going to convert to symbol. It's going to be a graphic. I'll just say R2. Then I'll move this to the edge of that. Now if I was doing my animation, I'll only be able to move from where the registration point is. So if I had a crane, I can't really move from anywhere else besides where that particular point is. So that's the purpose of registration point. So we will cover more of that down the road. Any questions on that? Remember, the size of our stage can be modified. Currently it's set by 550 pixels, by 400. So 550 pixels in width and 400 pixels in height. Okay, I'm going to close this and start afresh. And try not to clutter your stage with a lot of stuff. And if I start afresh, try to start from the beginning. You can always save these files. You can create a folder, call it week 2, save it as, you know, something meaningful. So the next page is 2-6, which generally covers, you know, drawing objects. We were able to draw a rectangle. We're able to draw oval, primitive. We could do polystars. You know, there's lots of other objects you can draw and you can manipulate. We could draw a line, and then we can also change the stroke of it. So whenever we select an object, the properties panel on the right side will change. So I could change the stroke to make it far more thicker. You know, I could say maybe I want a hairline. I don't want it to be solid. I want it to be dashed. So I could have no fill. Let's have a stroke of black, no fill. And let's do a circle. Now you could see what the stroke is. The stroke is based on what I had selected earlier on, which was dashed. And I could change that if I like. I could say ragged. So you could play around with different types of styles. So you could imagine a combination of this. So if I was to redraw, say, multiples of this and resize them using the free transform tool, I could place it in the middle. It's kind of jittery. Flash is a bit slow. And I could do multiples, and I could have this sort of come out, you know, if in terms of different colors. So I could change the color of this stroke to maybe, I don't know, a red. I could have this, the outer one, rotate clockwise, and the inner one maybe rotate anti-clockwise. So try to be as creative. You know, there's lots of things you can do with animation. But that just gives you an idea of what you can do whenever you draw a line or you draw any particular object. So if you wanted to create lots of dots or a splat type of effect, you know, you could select the stroke and have maybe you know, stippled or ragged or dotted or dashed. Imagine drawing that individually. It'll take you probably a much longer time. So if you had like a checked shirt, I mean, you could, you know, you could put lines there if you want to. You could even mask it. So always, you know, try to get as much practice as possible in terms of drawing objects. So moving on to. Any questions on that? Any questions? Remember, if you do have questions, you can go to Angel. And you can go into animation. This particular class, go to lessons. And if there's any questions you want me to show by video, click on instructor questions for weekly video and I'll cover that. So if you're finding something challenging and you just don't get it, make sure you post that question here. Other questions go under questions for instructor. So we could have using the brush or the pen. So I just did that with the brush. It's not going to be as great using the brush with a mouse. Yeah, Flash is there's a delay on my my machine here. Let's start again. But you could keep what you have there, so you could play around with what you have. Yeah, it was much faster. So you could see, you know, I selected the pen draw, and by default I had stippled, and now it will actually convert that to dots. So you could imagine, you know, if you're trying to cover an area with just dots or have that kind of effect, it's going to be far more easier. You could also do frame by frame animation. We'll do frame by frame. So initially you just start with a few dots, and then, you know, it increases over time. So let's just go back to solid. When you do select a particular line on the bottom left-hand side, you will see straighten and smooth. So we're actually on page 2-12 of the textbook. You could smooth that if you want to, or you can straighten it. And if there's something that's just not quite there, so you can use those options to straighten an area or to smooth it. So I've covered how to apply colors. So once again, if we were to draw a circle, my stroke's a bit thick there, so I'm just going to ensure that I have no stroke. So once again, I can go to the fill, and I can select any of these colors. I could also select presets or 3D type of colors too. So we have this circle, you know, we could have this bouncing up and down with some kind of a shadow at the bottom, and we can create a blur effect, which I will do as we move on. So I'm just going to split that into half, and I'm going to draw another circle. Going to create a like a dish or something. Control C, create another layer. I'm just going to put this on there. So I've got these objects, 3 objects on different layers. And I'm just going to move that to the background. And I'll do the back layer. I'll kind of darken it, so it seems that this sort of ball is in there. So it didn't take long. It's not great, but you could see, you know, what you can do. Does that make sense? So all I did was add 3 layers. Who wants me to redo that? Okay, let me redo this again. So I'm going to go into start afresh. I'll just create the first layer, call it ball. So rather than having layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, I would give it a name. I'm going to use the oval tool, and then I'm going to select the fill color. The fill color in my case, let me change this fill color to maybe, I don't know, a red. So I'm going to draw a red ball. Again, I'll just move this aside here. We don't need that for the time being. Then I'm going to create, say, call it dish 1, dish 2. So this time I'm going to create another oval, but this time I'm going to give it, say, a blue color. Create a bit, it's going to be a bit bigger. Then I'm going to chop it in half. I'm going to chop it by going to the selection tool, select that, and slice it in half there. That's selected there. Let me move this away. So once again, I'm going to select half of it, and I'm going to delete it. Then I'm going to go to the edge of that top line and pull it down a bit. Okay. Now I'm going to reuse this same object. I'm going to Control C, and I'm going to paste it onto a different layer, which is Dish 2. So these objects are all on separate layers. If they were on the same layer, then we could probably merge objects. We'll suddenly sort of chop objects into small sections. Now I'm going to pull this back up and kind of give it a curvature coming up. So this is going to be the back end of my dish. I'm going to change this to kind of a darker color. And now I'm going to pull it down. Obviously it's covering this layer, so I need to move Dish 2 a layer down so it's behind that. And now I need to resize this. I could do this. I could do all kinds of stuff. I don't need all this section. Now, I'm never going to see it, so I'm just going to put it at the back. So I'm just going to move this to the back. And we will do a lot of layers, so remember you get yourself familiar with layers. So now I've got that as the back. So this is kind of like a dish. Now I'm going to put this ball, it should be in the middle. So I've got to move that layer to be the middle layer. There. Okay, I'll do this again. So step 1, we have layer 1. I'm going to give it the name. Call it ball. Then the first thing, we draw the ball. We could just draw a small ball and obviously give it a better fill color, give it more dimensions. So go to fill color. I'll choose red. Here's my ball. Now I'm going to create another layer, new layer on the top left hand side in the timeline. This will allow you to create a layer. So I'll go call this dish. I'll just call it dish. And I'm going to have say a green dish. It's going to be another oval. Okay, it's not exactly an oval, but I've changed it slightly, so I've stretched it. Now I want to chop it into half. How do we chop objects? Remember, we can go to the selection tool and we can just select the area that I want to chop. So I want to chop it right there. You know, I could leave it as is, just leave it like that if I wanted to. I mean, it looks good. Or I could pull this down slightly, give it more dimension. Then I would select this, Control C to copy and create another layer. So I've got 3 layers now, dish, ball, and I'm going to have dish back. And I'm going to paste it there. There. So if I move it at the back, it's identical to what's the front of the dish. So I need to pull this up. Remember, to pull it up, we go to the edge of that object and we see the arc that appears. Now we pull it up. Now the back has to be kind of dark. So I'm going to change it to black. Now I'm going to move it here. I don't want that to be on top of these two layers. Therefore, I need to move that layer to the bottom. Anything that's at the bottom will be at the far back end of our stage, so it's going to be right at the end. So I'm going to move this right there. There it is.
I see it. I just when I chopped it, when you chop.
What was that, sorry? You can't select it. So any questions on that? I mean, things we could do are, because these are separate objects, you know, we could have suddenly this ball comes in, the dish kind of rattles and it sort of stabilizes, you know, just sits there then. So there's all kinds of things you can do in terms of animation. But right now we're just focusing on drawing objects. That's all. We could have other things, you know, I could have a shadow. You know, we're not going to cover that, but, you know, we could do that. I could convert that to a symbol. Then I could say, let's have a, let's see, do this again. So convert that to symbol, say movie clip. Then we could have filters. I could have a blur there if I wanted to. So you could see, I'm going to cover more blurs on that, don't worry about that. But you could see, you know, there's more depth there by just introducing the slight blur under there. So, you know, suddenly we could have the dish falls, then we could change the size of this if we want to. So all kinds of stuff that we can do. Did everyone get that? Did you get that? Or did some of you manage to merge objects? Suddenly now you've got the bowl and the dish, they're all just stuck together. You're thinking, geez, did you get that? You need to remember they've got to be on separate layers. So what we've covered is strokes and how to fill selected objects, how we can also group them together. You can generally group them if they're in a layer, how we can chop off sections of an object. So let me try to work on this and let's create something besides kind of a dish or something. Let's see what we can create. You know, I prefer to kind of draw or something, but let's see what we can do with a circle. Let's see. So I'm going to create multiple circles. So all I'm doing is I've just drawn a circle. I don't even know what it's going to be right now. Maybe a dog or something, I guess. So I'm using a combination of just circles. Now I'm going to kind of split this. Just going to zoom in. See what we can do. So I just drew a circle or an oval there. I'm going to free transform it. And I'll just chop a section off there. Looks more like a dinosaur now, I guess. Yeah, dinosaur's great. So now we can, so you can see how easy it is just to chop sections off. Maybe I could put another, put an eye there. So let's have kind of a different gray. It's like specks there. And we'll stick with this. So let's have a darker gray. So I just moved it aside. There you go. Remember, you can pull an object down if you like. So we could even have a body at the bottom if we want to. So let's have body at the bottom. I'm going to scale this down, move this off the stage, and I'm going to scale it down. So the way to scale it down is I want to select all of it, and then you can either go to free transform. What I tend to do is I do right click, then I select free transform, scale it down, and I could even flip it to the other side. So I'm just playing with circles here, nothing more but just circles. So I've got this other circle which is going to be my body. I'm going to put this on a separate layer. So I'll just say face, then I'll give it another layer, call that body, and let's just place that there. And now I can play around with how I want this circle to look. And I can move that down. Okay, more like, okay, I'll stick with that actually. Stick with that. Now all I need is a feet, or maybe the arms there. So I could have another layer for the arms. So I'll just say arm. A good example that I created some time back can be found on rav.com, ravkang.com, sorry, ravkang.com. And if you go to projects, I did one Yoda. So, you know, we're just playing around with Yoda. We've got an arm there. The whole purpose of that is the arms are separate to the other object. So that's why we want to separate them. So we can't have everything all on one layer. So in order for animation to occur, you need to remember to separate them. So this is what I'm doing here. So the face, we could have this sort of move up and down. So if we had this object moving, you know, we could have it move up and down, bob up and down, and then we could have the arms go across. So I'm just going to draw, I'm using circles again. So I'm just going to use a different shade here for the arm. Let's see. So I'm going to select that different shade, and I'm going to move it there. It's more like a bird now, but we could change that. Move it out here. Sometimes it's easier to work on it outside of the object. So we're just playing around with two sort of colors really, and different shades. And you can see how that's panning out. And actually I could use the same object to create the feet. So I'm going to use the same object. I'm going to create another layer, call it feet. And I'm just going to paste this. And now I'm just going to rotate this. Free transform. Free transform. And there's going to be, that's our feet. So I could move this to the end of the body, or say at the top. Obviously, we need to adjust it. And now I can actually play around with the free transform tool and just or just pull it out a bit. And the more you practice, the better you will get. You're probably thinking, geez, I can't do this, first time. Unless, you're kind of in the visual arts, that kind of class. Then you're kind of used to it. But you can see there what we have. Didn't take long to do that, but I was just using one object and cutting objects. What you can do is, what I would tend to do is, Google, cartoon figures. See what kind of images there are. There's lots. I mean, they give you a really good idea how to start drawing. What you can do is if you take an object, so let's take, let's see what we have here. Let's take this object, this image. I'm going to take this, right click, and I'm going to copy it. And now I'm going to place it. I'm done with this. I'm going to close this. I'm going to start a new file. And I'm going to paste it. And I could draw over this. I could use this as my basic template. In fact, you can sketch something on a piece of paper. You could scan it, then dump it onto Flash, and then use different lines and different objects to move around it or draw around it. But let's go back to the previous one. We'll come back to this in a sec. I'd like to give you 10 odd minutes to play around and see, what kind of object, what kind of image you can create with just, say, the circles and just manipulating objects. So we'll come back to this in a sec.